Racist judge sentences Black mother to 105 years in prison, but panics when he discovers her father is the city's mayor. In a city in the southern United States marked by prejudice, the life of Alicia Johnson, a young black mother, transforms into a true nightmare. Alicia, a strong and determined woman, dreams of providing a better future for her children, but finds herself trapped in a web of injustice and discrimination, fighting to prove her innocence in a robbery and assault case that she swears is a setup. Devoid of resources and support, her story intertwines with that of Ethan Drake, the judge who condemns her, a man who believes in the superiority of his morality but carries a secret that could change everything. Alicia Johnson grew up in a suburban neighborhood in Atlanta, where the daily struggle for survival shaped her character. Raised by her mother, Margaret, who always taught her to face the world with courage, Alicia strives to give her children a dignified life, far from the hardships she faced. However, when she is accused of a crime she did not commit, the reality she knows transforms into a nightmare. In court, Judge Ethan Drake, known for his rigid posture and harsh opinions, pays no attention to the evidence that could exonerate her. The conviction is swift and brutal, and Alicia finds herself facing an absurd sentence of 105 years, unaware that her fate is more intertwined with that of the judge than she could imagine. As she confronts the oppression of the judicial system, loneliness and hopelessness threaten to consume Alicia. She remembers her mother's words, which always encouraged her to fight for the truth. The letters Margaret left behind, filled with love and wisdom, become her only comfort amid the chaos. The memories of her childhood, though filled with challenges, make her want to be a better mother. In her heart, the hope for a different future persists, even when the present seems bleak. Ethan Drake, on the other hand, lives imprisoned by his ingrained beliefs. He sees himself as a defender of justice, but his distorted view of morality leads him to ignore the truth. When Alicia's life enters his courtroom, he does not see a woman fighting for her freedom, but an opportunity to assert his power. However, a secret from the past involving his former lover Margaret begins to haunt him. The truth about Alicia's identity could not only shatter his convictions, but also force him to confront the hypocrisy that permeates his life. As the story unfolds, Margaret's letters reveal the truth about the past, leading both characters to a breaking point. Alicia, in search of justice, and Ethan, confronted with his own guilt, are forced to re-evaluate their lives and the nature of truth. What would happen when blood ties intertwined with injustice and prejudice? The journey of Alicia and Ethan is not just a fight for freedom, but a quest for redemption in a world that often refuses to see beyond skin color. Alicia Johnson sat in her cell, the dim light filtering through the bars, when the reality of her situation began to settle in her heart like a heavy stone. The conviction had been swift, and the pain of despair enveloped her like a dark cloak. With each passing day, Alicia wondered how everything had come to this point. How had a woman who only wanted to care for her children become a prisoner labeled a criminal? The memories of her childhood, the teachings of her mother, Margaret, echoed in her mind. The struggle for truth is the most important fight you can undertake, but truth seemed increasingly distant. The first days in prison were a test of emotional and physical endurance. Loneliness tormented her, and the lack of external support made each moment even more unbearable. Alicia quickly realized that to survive, she needed to be strong, not just for herself but for her children. The thought of them growing up without her presence pained her deeply. She remembered their laughter, the way their eyes sparkled as they listened to her stories. That image drove her to fight, but also left her vulnerable. The fear of not seeing them grow consumed her. In court, Ethan Drake was surrounded by admirers who applauded his decisions. He felt powerful, believing he was doing good. However, Alicia's conviction began to corrode his conscience. The defense's words, pleading for her innocence, echoed in his ears, but he struggled to ignore them. Each time he closed his eyes, the memory of Margaret and the secret they shared surfaced like ghosts from the past. He knew the truth could devastate everything he had built, but the urge to maintain his image always prevailed. Among the other prisoners, Alicia met Clara, an older woman who had been convicted of a crime she did not commit. Clara became a mentor to Alicia, sharing her experiences and teaching her to defend herself in the hostile prison environment. Clara saw in Alicia the determination she herself had years ago, and her support became an anchor amid the storm of emotions. However, the friendship also brought challenges. Clara hoped Alicia would join a defense group, But Alicia hesitated. The fear of retaliation and insecurity about her own strength left her paralyzed, which frustrated her friend. Alicia faced not only the oppression of the judicial system, but also the critical gazes of other prisoners who labeled her a criminal. Each day was a struggle to maintain her dignity and sanity. She wondered if she would ever be able to prove her innocence and return to her children. The emotional pressure made her question her own strength. She also felt the need to be an example for the other women around her, but doubt haunted her. What if she failed? Meanwhile, Ethan was struggling with his own demons. His conscience tormented him, and he found himself in a cycle of reflection. He was a man of power, but the feeling that he was wrong followed him like a shadow. The nights were long, filled with insomnia and regret, and he began to wonder if he was really making a difference or just perpetuating a cycle of injustice. He could no longer ignore the idea that Alicia could be more than just a simple defendant, but a daughter he had never known. Tension mounted as Alicia approached a breaking point emotionally. The letters from her mother, which she kept close to her heart, became a constant reminder of what was at stake. One night, while talking to Clara about her hopes and fears, Alicia caught a glimpse of her inner strength. Clara encouraged her to fight, not just for her children, but for all the women facing injustices. Alicia realized she needed to stand up, not just for herself, but for all those whose voices had been silenced. The desire for justice began to outweigh the fear of failure. She decided she could no longer wait for someone to save her. She needed to take the reins of her destiny. Thus, the quest for proof of her innocence became her new mission. At the same time, Ethan found himself increasingly torn between his beliefs and the truth that haunted him. What would happen when he finally confronted Alicia and the truth about his past? The answer to that question could change not only Alicia's fate, but also Ethan's life forever. Alicia was determined to change the course of her story, but the challenges she faced in prison were immense and seemed heavier with each passing day. She began her search for proof of innocence with Clara by her side, but soon realized that the environment was much more hostile than she had imagined. The rivalries among the prisoners were palpable, and the psychological pressure to conform to a standard of behavior, to give up her fight, was everywhere. One afternoon, while reviewing her notes in a secluded corner of the yard, Alicia was approached by a group of women who surrounded her. With challenging looks, they made nasty comments about her conviction. One of them said with disdain that she was just a criminal. Alicia felt the heat of shame rise to her face, and doubt hit her like a punch to the stomach. It was hard to maintain dignity when the cutting words of the other women seemed to confirm her insecurities. But with superhuman effort, she took a deep breath and remembered her children's laughter. She couldn't let those words bring her down. Clara noticed Alicia's internal struggle and decided to intervene. She approached the group and, in a bold gesture, confronted the prisoners. She stated that Alicia might have made a mistake, but that didn't define her. "We all have our battles." Clara's firm voice resonated in the yard. Clara's attitude gave Alicia a boost, a new hope that friendship and solidarity could be a shield against hostility. However, this intervention also brought consequences. The group of women became even more hostile, and Clara and Alicia became targets of gossip and disdainful looks. As the days went by, the pressure increased, and Alicia found herself in a vulnerable emotional state. She began to have trouble sleeping, her nights marked by nightmares about her children and what they might be thinking of her. On one of those nights, as she tossed and turned in her bed, she decided she needed a more concrete strategy. With Clara's help, they began to devise a plan to seek information that could help them uncover what really happened on the day of Alicia's conviction. However, each attempt to seek this truth seemed to present a new obstacle. They discovered that the evidence was being manipulated and that some witnesses were refusing to speak. Frustration began to erode Alicia's determination. In a moment of despair, she questioned whether all the effort would be worth it. Clara, sensing her disillusionment, pulled her into a quiet corner and said, "Remember, Alicia, the struggle is never in vain. Each step we take is a step toward the truth, even if it seems small." Clara's words ignited a flame within Alicia, but the fear of failure never left her. The weight of responsibility for her children and the pressure to be an example for the other women kept her in a constant state of alertness. What she didn't know was that Ethan, on the other hand, was also undergoing a transformation. The sleepless nights forced him to reflect on his decisions and the nature of justice. He began to secretly investigate the circumstances of Alicia's case, feeling that something was not right but struggling against the idea that he could be mistaken. The tension between Alicia and the judicial system intensified, and Ethan's difficulties in reconciling his beliefs with his actions began to reflect in the decisions he made. He felt increasingly guilty for the conviction of a woman who, in his opinion, might be innocent. At the same time, the friendship between Alicia and Clara began to be tested. Clara, in her tireless quest for justice, started to pressure Alicia to go further, to expose herself more, to join other prisoners, to create a movement of resistance. But Alicia hesitated, fearing that this could bring severe repercussions. The disagreements between the two women grew, and Clara began to feel frustrated with Alicia's hesitance. "You need to be braver, Alicia. We can't change anything if we don't take risks," Clara said, with a mix of concern and impatience. This conversation left Alicia feeling torn, questioning whether she should follow Clara's advice or protect herself from what could be a dangerous path. Meanwhile, the emotional pressure Alicia felt intensified. Each day, the shadow of doubt and fear grew heavier, and the idea of failing in her fight for freedom seemed more real. The struggle for truth was not just an external battle. It was an internal war that made Alicia question her own strength and resilience. As she approached a breaking point, the choice she had to make became increasingly complex. She wondered if she was ready to face all of this, not just for her freedom, but for the truth that could change their lives forever. Before we continue with this gripping story, take a moment to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any stories, and let us know in the comments which city you are watching this video from. Alicia was at a critical moment in her journey. The accumulated pressure over the days, the rivalries, the looks of disdain, and the cruel words that hit her like arrows were becoming unbearable. On a cloudy morning, as she walked through the prison yard, she stumbled upon a scene that would change everything. A new prisoner, a younger woman, was being bullied by a group of inmates. Alicia hesitated, but when she heard the screams and insults, something inside her broke. Without thinking, she approached the group. "Leave her alone," her voice echoed, surprising everyone. The inmates turned to her, their eyes filled with hostility. The young woman, frightened, looked at Alicia with hope. The group of women wasted no time retaliating. "Look who's talking, the criminal who can't defend herself." One of them stepped closer, making threatening gestures. Alicia felt a chill in her stomach, but determination kept her from backing down. She couldn't allow someone else to go through what she had faced. The verbal fight intensified, and in a moment of pure adrenaline, Alicia found herself challenging not only the other prisoners, but her own fear. "You are no better than I am. We are all here for a reason. We all have our stories." The words came out without her intending to, but they resonated in her heart. The group hesitated for a brief moment, and Alicia saw a spark of empathy in the young woman's eyes. However, the group's reaction was quick and fierce. One of the prisoners, furious, pushed Alicia, who lost her balance and fell to the ground. The impact was hard, but not as hard as the emotional pain that hit her. What had she done? Was this what she wanted? To defend someone while exposing herself to more humiliation and violence? Tears threatened to escape, but she held them back. The young prisoner approached, extending her hand to help Alicia up. "Thank you," she whispered, and that simple word carried immense weight. As Alicia stood up, she felt a wave of anger and sadness. What she had done had not changed her situation, but it had ignited a light within her. In that moment, she realized that the struggle was not only for her freedom, but for the dignity of all the women there. The revelation shook her deeply. The battle she was facing was not just against the system, but also against her own insecurities and the fear that paralyzed her. Clara's words echoed in her mind. The fight is never in vain. Alicia had never felt this so intensely. The truth was that she was afraid of failing, but now she understood that the true failure would be to remain silent. The decision to stand up and fight for another woman had changed her perspective. She could no longer allow fear to control her. However, this newfound determination came at a cost. The hostility from the group intensified, and in the following days, Alicia and Clara became constant targets of aggression. Gossip about them spread like wildfire, and the emotional pressure Alicia was already facing escalated. She felt the weight of her choices. What had once seemed like an act of courage was now becoming a source of anxiety. The fear of retaliation and losing Clara's friendship consumed her. Ethan, on the outside, was becoming increasingly involved in his own quest for truth. His sleepless nights turned into moments of deep reflection. He remembered every detail of Alicia's trial, the way the evidence was presented, and how the defense was undermined. The revelation that justice might have failed hit him like a punch in the gut. He felt responsible for contributing to the conviction of a woman who now seemed innocent. This guilt drove him to investigate further, even if it meant risking his career. Alicia and Ethan were on parallel paths, both fighting for justice, yet unaware that soon their journeys would intersect in unexpected ways. Alicia's fight for truth and dignity had made her stronger, but it had also left her vulnerable. She began to question whether the path she was on was truly the best choice. What did it mean to succeed in her fight, to be free, or was it more than that? As the tension mounted, Alicia realized she was about to enter a new chapter of her life, one that could define not only her future, but also the future of other women around her. She needed to find a balance between courage and protection, between the fight for truth and the safety of everyone. What would it take to achieve that? Doubt lingered over her, but the determination to fight for justice began to solidify in her heart. Alicia sat in her small space in the prison dormitory, her mind racing. The act of defending Clara had changed everything. The words of support she had offered now seemed to carry less weight as the reprisals began to accumulate. The inmates who had previously ignored her now viewed her as a threat. The group that had intimidated her became even more aggressive, and the looks that had once been indifferent were now filled with disdain. As night fell, when most of the prisoners were silent, Alicia found herself reflecting on her decision. She stared at the ceiling, shadows dancing on the walls, and thought about the consequences of her choice. There was an emotional cost she had not anticipated. Fear accompanied her with every step, every whisper she heard behind her back. She felt exposed, vulnerable, and loneliness wrapped around her like a heavy blanket. "You shouldn't have gotten involved," a familiar voice whispered. It was Clara, who approached cautiously. "They are furious. And now, you're on their list too." Clara's tone was worried, and Alicia felt a pang of guilt. What she had done affected not only herself, but also the friend she had found amid chaos. "I couldn't just stand by, Clara. Not after what I saw," Alicia replied, trying to justify her actions. However, doubt settled in her heart. Had it really been the right decision? Defending another woman had led her down a path filled with hostility, and now she felt like a prisoner, not just of the cell walls, but of the fear that consumed her. In the following days, tensions intensified. The prisoners began to organize into small groups, and Alicia and Clara became frequent targets for taunts. They were sarcastically called heroines, and even threatened with physical aggression. The environment became increasingly hostile, and Alicia realized that the act of courage she had taken was turning into an unbearable burden. One morning, while walking in the yard, Alicia noticed a group of inmates laughing and pointing at her. Her heart raced, and insecurity enveloped her mind like a fog. "What are you looking at, criminal?" one of them shouted, and the laughter intensified. Alicia felt her legs weaken, but she forced herself to keep her head held high. She remembered the young woman she had defended, how hope had shone in her eyes. That image helped her withstand the pressure. "You have no idea what it's like to be a real criminal. Just because you're behind bars doesn't make you better than me," Alicia responded, trying to find courage in her words. The laughter ceased for a moment, and she saw a glimpse of surprise on the others' faces. But soon, hostility returned with greater force. "You think you can stand up to us? Just wait for the next moment of weakness." Alicia stepped away, her heart heavy. The emotional pressure was becoming unbearable. She knew she needed to find a way to cope with the situation, but she wasn't sure how. She talked to Clara, who was always by her side. "We need to unite. If we stick together, maybe we can face this," she suggested. However, the idea of unity felt distant. Other prisoners were closed off in their own fears and insecurities. Alicia realized that her fight was not just against the inmates, but also against the very culture of fear that permeated the environment. She began to think about how she could change this, how she could transform pain into strength. On a rainy night, as the drops hit the bars of the window, Alicia decided she needed a new plan. Instead of just defending herself, she could try to create a support space for other prisoners. "If we can show them they're not alone, maybe we can change the dynamic," she thought. The idea of forming a small support group energized her, and she began to consider how to share their stories, their struggles, with other women. In a moment of introspection, she sat down with Clara and began planning. "We can do this together, share our experiences, show that we are more than the situations we face." Clara smiled, and for the first time in days, Alicia felt a wave of hope. If they could unite, maybe they could withstand the adversities that arose. The consequences of her turning point were clear. The fight was far from over, and new obstacles presented themselves each day. But now Alicia was not willing to give up. With each challenge, she became stronger and more determined to fight not only for herself, but for all those who were suffering in silence. She realized that true courage was not the absence of fear, but the ability to face it, and she was ready to fight for a better future, not just for herself, but for all the women around her. Alicia observed the life around her, feeling increasingly trapped in a cycle of fear and hostility. The threats from the prisoners would follow her, but something inside her began to change. She realized that, although surrounded by adversities, she had the option to transform her pain into something positive. With the idea of forming a support group, her mind filled with possibilities. What had started as an act of defense for Clara transformed into a personal mission. On that rainy night when loneliness felt the most intense, Alicia remembered when she arrived at prison. She had entered full of insecurities and doubts, but now, after facing hostilities, she felt a spark of strength she had never recognized before. The fear was still present, but she decided she would not allow it to paralyze her. On the contrary, it would be fuel for her transformation. Alicia and Clara began to meet with other prisoners in discreet moments, creating a safe space where they could share their stories. At first, the women were reluctant. Fear still dominated them, and distrust was palpable. But Alicia, with her renewed courage, began to open her heart. She spoke about her insecurities, her fears, and her hopes. Clara accompanied her, and with each story shared, the atmosphere became a little lighter. Over time, more women joined the group. They began to share their experiences, discovering that they were not alone in their struggles. Alicia realized that by telling her stories, she was also healing. The pain she felt seemed lighter when shared with others. She learned that vulnerability was not a sign of weakness, but a bridge to empathy and friendship. The interactions in the group deepened. Alicia noticed that while she helped others face their challenges, she was also dealing with her own. Each meeting became an opportunity for reflection and growth. She started to see her own struggles in a new light. Defending Clara had opened a door to solidarity, and this encouraged her to trust herself more. Over time, the prisoners began to see themselves not just as inmates, but as women facing personal battles. Alicia realized that true success was not in imposing herself over others, but in creating a support network. This made her understand that wealth was not measured in material goods, but in the human connections she formed. With each new friendship, with each new shared story, she felt her spirit grow stronger. However, the journey was not easy. The group brought to light not only stories of overcoming, but also deep traumas. Alicia encountered stories that touched her deeply, and at times she felt overwhelmed. The pain of others affected her, and the emotional pressure was significant. But instead of shutting down, she learned to seek support from Clara and the other women. Together they found strength in each other's vulnerabilities, which became a foundation for collective growth. Alicia started to apply the lessons she learned in her own life. She remembered moments when she hesitated to stand up for herself, and now, seeing other women rise, she felt a new determination. She practiced compassion and empathy, not only with others, but with herself. Forgiving her past choices became an important step in her journey of self-discovery. She realized she didn't need to be perfect. What mattered was to keep trying. One day, while walking in the yard, Alicia felt something different. The fear that once dominated her was diminishing. She had found her place among those women. When some prisoners confronted her with hostility instead of retreating, she took a deep breath. She thought, "We are here to support each other." And instead of feeling threatened, she felt strong, as if she had an invisible armor. Over time, Alicia's support group began to make a difference. The culture of fear that had previously prevailed began to dissipate slowly. Solidarity and friendship grew, and Alicia saw that the true struggle was not just for her safety, but for transforming the environment around her. She had become a leader without intending to, and with it, a new understanding emerged. She was not just an inmate, she was a symbol of resistance and courage. Alicia understood that life is a series of new beginnings. The adversities she faced did not define her but shaped who she would become. Each challenge was an opportunity to learn, to grow, and to connect with others. And so, with each passing day, Alicia became stronger, more self-assured, and more determined to fight not only for herself, but for all the women who, like her, sought a path of light amid the darkness. Alicia was sitting in a corner of the yard, watching the movement of the prisoners around her. The support group she had formed had become a refuge, but tensions between some women still lingered in the air. That day, something felt different. A group of prisoners who had always been hostile was approaching. Alicia's heart raced. She knew this moment could be decisive. The women stared at her with disdain, and Alicia felt a chill in her stomach. But instead of retreating, she took a deep breath and remembered everything she had learned. "We are here to support each other," she repeated mentally. Clara, who was by her side, held her hand, giving her courage. Alicia stood up, her eyes fixed on the other prisoners. She felt the pressure of the situation, but now it was different. There was a strength within her, a determination that hadn't existed before. "I know you are going through tough times," Alicia began, her voice firm yet gentle. "Each of us carries our own battles, but instead of attacking each other, why don't we try to understand one another?" The proposal was met with silence and skeptical looks. Some women began to whisper among themselves, but Alicia did not let it affect her. She remembered the stories she had shared, the pains that had turned into empathy. "I am not perfect. I have faced my fears, just like you. Together we can find a way to overcome this." One of the prisoners, named Raquel, who had always been among the most hostile, stepped forward. "And what do you know about pain? What do you know about life in here?" The challenge was laid down, and the silence became palpable. Alicia felt the pressure mount, but this was not a moment of weakness. It was an opportunity. "I know that pain is not measured by bars or walls," she replied, her voice steady. "I know that each of us has a story that brought us here, and I know that fear can be a powerful enemy, but it doesn't have to be the only thing that guides us. We can choose courage." Alicia's words echoed in the yard. She saw other prisoners starting to move, some nodding in agreement. Raquel hesitated, the anger in her gaze beginning to dissipate. "And what if I don't want to open up? What if I don't want to be a part of this?" The frustration was still there, but Alicia saw a weakness that hadn't been there before. Vulnerability was showing itself, and this could be the beginning of a change. "You don't have to do anything you don't want to," Alicia said with compassion. "But maybe if you give this a chance, you might discover that you're not alone, that it's not about being strong or weak, but about being human." Alicia felt she was touching something deep. The group, which had once seemed divided, was now coming together around a bigger idea. Raquel looked at the other prisoners, seeking support in their gazes. "I don't know if I can," Raquel finally admitted, her voice trembling. "But maybe I can try." Alicia smiled, a genuine smile that radiated hope. What had started as a confrontation was transforming into a moment of unity. The prisoners began to draw closer, sharing their stories, their struggles, and their hopes. Alicia saw that on that day, something had changed. The fear that had once dominated the yard was dissipating, replaced by a feeling of solidarity. The women were coming together, not just as prisoners, but as friends. Alicia realized that her journey was not just about facing fear, but about finding strength in vulnerability. She had overcome her challenges, transforming her pain into a source of empathy, and in doing so, she had created a space where each woman could feel safe and valued. In that moment, Alicia understood that success was not in being the strongest or the most feared, but in being the one who could bring people together around her. The support group she had created was now a source of light amidst the darkness, and the friendships that had formed were a testament to the power of human connection. Alicia's journey had been long and full of challenges, but now, looking at the women around her, she knew she had found her purpose. The pain that once trapped her had now become a pathway to freedom, and in that instant she felt that at last she was home. Alicia watched the prisoners around her, each sharing their stories. The voices that had once been mere murmurs of discontent were now intertwining in a chorus of vulnerability and strength. She felt that somehow transformation was beginning to happen, not only within each woman, but also within herself. As the days passed, the yard became a more welcoming space. Conversations among the prisoners began to flow naturally, and the tensions that had previously existed seemed to have dissipated. Alicia remembered how it had been before: fear, distrust, and loneliness. Now there were laughter, support, and understanding, as if each woman was rebuilding herself one brick at a time into a new structure of solidarity. Raquel, who had been one of the most hostile, had now become a constant presence in the group. She shared her experiences and listened attentively to the stories of others. Alicia noticed how Raquel's expression had changed. The anger that had once marked her gaze was transforming into a line of hope. One afternoon, as the rays of sunlight filtered through the bars of the yard, Raquel turned to Alicia and said, "I didn't think I could trust you, but you really do care. Thank you for showing me that there was another way to live here." Those words deeply touched Alicia. She knew her journey had not been in vain. What had once been a solitary struggle had now become a collective mission. Alicia began to organize regular gatherings where the prisoners could come together to talk, share, and even do activities together. They created a small book club where each could bring a book and discuss their favorite stories and characters. The yard, which had once been a space of sorrow, had now become a place of learning and growth. However, not everything was perfect. Some prisoners were still reluctant to open up. In one of those meetings, a woman named Fernanda, who always kept to the sidelines, finally spoke up. "It's easy for you all to talk about support and friendship, but what about the pain we carry? It doesn't just disappear because we're here." Silence hung in the air, and Alicia realized there was still much work to be done. With empathy, Alicia responded, "Fernanda, you are absolutely right. Our pains don't disappear, but we can choose how to deal with them. I also have difficult days, but when I see all of you here, I feel I'm not alone. What we can do is support each other, even in the darkest moments." Alicia's response resonated among the prisoners. They began to open up about their own experiences, creating a space where pain was acknowledged but not allowed to dominate. Alicia felt a weight lift from her shoulders. True freedom was not just about escaping the bars, but about freeing oneself from the emotional chains each one carried. Over time, Alicia realized that she also needed to take care of herself. The conversations and stories shared were a balm, but they also demanded energy from her that sometimes left her exhausted. One quiet night, while looking at the starry sky through the small window of her cell, she made a promise to herself to not forget her own journey, her own needs. She started setting aside time to meditate and reflect, seeking a balance between supporting others and caring for herself. In that moment of introspection, Alicia understood that her strength came not just from courage, but also from vulnerability. It was okay to feel fear, sadness, and even frustration, and by sharing this with the group, she encouraged the others to do the same. Every day, every conversation brought her closer to who she truly was. The impact of this new dynamic was palpable. The prisoners were no longer just women in a confined space. They were friends, confidants, and above all, a community. Alicia felt that she had created something lasting. The pain that had once imprisoned her had now become a pathway to freedom and mutual growth. Alicia knew that challenges still lay ahead, but with each passing day, she felt stronger and more connected to the women around her. In this new home that had emerged between the bars and cold walls, Alicia finally found not only her voice, but also a purpose that transcended the prison, uniting them all on a journey of healing and hope. Alicia observed, now with a new perspective, how the prisoners around her had transformed. The yard, once a place of despair, now pulsed with life, laughter, and shared stories. The bond she had helped create not only strengthened each woman individually, but also united them in an unbreakable tie. They were no longer just prisoners. They were friends, accomplices in their struggles and victories. As the months went by, Alicia became a central figure in this space of welcome. The support she offered each of them also empowered her, and she reflected on how her own journey had transformed her. The fear and loneliness that had once consumed her were replaced by a sense of purpose. She realized that true freedom was not just about physical escape, but about liberating herself from the emotional weight that accompanied her. By opening her heart and sharing her vulnerabilities, she encouraged others to do the same, creating an environment where pain was recognized and embraced. However, life in prison was never simple. The prison system was ruthless, and some prisoners, like the manipulative Clara, still tried to maintain the division among them. Clara, who had benefited from distrust and fear, began to feel the threat that the new bond represented. In a moment of anger and despair, Clara decided to take revenge, spreading lies about Alicia and the reading club, trying to destabilize the trust that had been built. But instead of allowing herself to be shaken, Alicia took a courageous stand. She decided to confront Clara, not with anger, but with understanding. In a tense meeting, Alicia looked into Clara's eyes and said that she understood Clara had her reasons for acting that way, but they could choose another path. What did Clara have to gain from this? They could be stronger together. Alicia's sincerity surprised Clara, who hesitated in the face of the empathy she received. This act of courage not only disarmed Clara, but also further strengthened the group. The prisoners, inspired by Alicia's bravery, rallied around her, showing that true strength resided in solidarity. They decided that they would not allow the negativity of one person to divide them. Thus, the reading club grew, and the stories they read and shared became a symbol of resistance and hope. Alicia realized that instead of seeking revenge, she had chosen a path of compassion and understanding, and this decision not only transformed her, but also everyone around her. They learned that even in a dark place, it was possible to cultivate light and love. This journey of overcoming and resilience made them realize that true friendship and mutual support could dismantle any barrier. At the end of that long journey, Alicia felt she had achieved more than physical freedom. She had found her own voice and purpose. The lessons she learned about empathy, strength, and unity would stay with her forever. And looking toward the future, she knew that the friendship that had formed among those women was a powerful force capable of overcoming any adversity. Alicia invited everyone to reflect on their own stories and challenges. If you have also faced difficulties, remember, it's never too late to rise again. Share your experiences and inspire others to find their strength. Together, we can transform our pains into power and our struggles into friendship. If you identified with our story, like and subscribe so that more people can hear this message of hope. Let's spread the light one heart at a time.